Man, I want to talk to you about connection, and in a time where, media and technology is like 3/4 of what we are allowed to do in this moment. It's really easy to get sucked into news, social media, Netflix, whatever the case may be. And I know you just wrote a great piece on separating from your technology. We know the power of connection, but you got to give me some tactics, some tricks, man, on being able to disconnect, as that seems to be a difficult one for us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And before I get into specific methods, like that's a skill I'm continuing to develop, and it's not an easy one. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
one of the biggest things I think is important to acknowledge about that is it's unavoidable. I mean, technology has crept into almost every possible space
Yeah.
that it could, and as it should. I mean, it's not, if there's an area that life can be made better, some entrepreneur or some person in the tech industry who wants to have an impact is going to find that space and create a solution. So that's really the important piece. Is it's this fine balance of not judging yourself because you find yourself in front of a screen, but at the same time understanding that it is very easy to hit a point of diminishing return, a point at which you start to lose focus, you start to get into a little bit of a fog. Depending on what you're doing, it can really have some negative effects on your mental health. I mean, think
Mhm.
about these people that we all know. We all probably have some kind of example in our personal lives or what have you, about somebody that is just too deep down the rabbit hole of arguing with people on Facebook,
Yeah.
or jumping on the Twitter and getting just completely wrapped up in this cacophony of opinions floating
Right.
around. So it's very easy, very, very easy for that to take a negative turn. On the flip side of that, go
So
ahead.
giving ourselves a little bit of leeway, some room to understand that it happens. B, it's okay. It happens to everybody, and it's the nature of modern life right now. It's surrounding us. There's a lot of good that can come from it. There's a lot of benefits that can happen through it, especially as we're isolated into our homes. But you're saying there is a line that's drawn. There is a fine line that you can cross over where it becomes detrimental, and you were going into, when does it become detrimental? What are some signs and symptoms of knowing that you've crossed that line?
I'm going to speak to the ones I experienced personally, because the entire reason that I've had to develop this skill is out of necessity. So, I mean,
Yeah.
um, just the demands of the role that I handle for Performance Unlimited literally require me to be in front of a screen. Cannot execute the job to any degree without a screen.
You're our
Um,
CMO. You're our marketing guru.
yeah, well, I appreciate that, but it's more so, it's something that I had to learn out of necessity. Not that, I'm not going to paint this picture that I went into, this grand like downward spiral and was just completely detached from reality. But it's more so I started to realize a handful of things. And as I go through this kind of checklist, maybe people listening or watching this will go, "Oh man, that kind of sounds familiar." It
Mhm.
From a physical standpoint, you're in front of a computer, in front of a phone or what have you, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're just scrolling through TikTok, which is what the kids do these days, or you're editing video or writing a blog or filing SBA paperwork, etc. I mean, it's very easy for 3-4 hours to have gone by without you even standing up.
Right.
Super easy, especially if you're like me and you grab a handful of seltzers. You don't just grab one, you grab like two, refill the coffee. So like you actually don't have to get, to get up. It's easy to enable yourself in that regard, subconsciously. From a mental standpoint, just pure overstimulation.
Mm.
I mean, we are so overstimulated. I always make the joke about back when I was in college, I would find myself, no joke, I would find myself playing a video game, right, with some friends or what have you, having a podcast on in the background,
Hmm.
and I would find myself tuning out from both of those to scroll through my phone and check Snapchat or social media or what have you. And I can remember just hitting certain points, around like 3, 4 p.m. in the day where I'm just like, I've barely done anything and I'm completely exhausted. I mean, I am drained. And then
So
when I
two
stopped and
two dichotomies: a subtraction of efforts in other key components in your life, and then an overstimulation from an addition or an overconsumption of one thing chronically that diminishes the quality of that effort or work altogether.
yeah, I mean, and even listen, I mean, video games is not work, or effort, unless you're one of these streamers making 350K a month, then definitely, I would definitely say that's work. But I mean, it's at no point in human history have we consumed information on the scale that we do today. I saw
Okay.
this interesting, I don't know how factual it is, but anecdotally, it seems believable enough. I saw, ironically, I saw a tweet the other day that said your average 6-year-old in today's time will have processed more information by the time they are 6 than a baby boomer would have in their entire life.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And we know that the consumption, the quality or the type of consumption is going to shape our thoughts, right? And our thoughts are shaping those actions. So that can make a huge impact on who you are during that time, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely, and even, I mean, just think about it. The question that's never asked in current times, or not asked enough, I would argue, is should we? The only question we're concerned about is can we, or how can we? We rarely ask if we should, and so that's kind of step one to start actually answering your question. That's kind of step one, is just realizing that it is okay to not constantly be stimulating yourself or not constantly be consuming information.
Give yourself
But
that permission.
for sure, I think that's huge. It's one of the things I actually cover in the article, is just a couple, literally two big affirmations right off the jump. Number one being, it is perfectly acceptable for you to unplug. And I mean, I'm super thankful that, in our work relationship, that's something that you've always been very clear about, from day one. Like, hey, listen, I know this social media thing never stops. I know you're posting things at 9 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's time. Neither of those times you're, on the clock, like, well, except I am on the clock at 5 now, but it, but you were very quick to be like, it's always appreciated. It's never expected. How can we set it up so you don't actually have to spend that time,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, and within that element of permission, of giving yourself that room to be okay with putting stuff down, when is there moments, and how often is it that that work and that opportunity that you feel like and you feel rushed to be able to execute whatever it is that you're doing is not still there tomorrow? And the work is usually there. So the time to be able to work on it when we're better, when we're fresh, when we're connected to it, when we're focused on it, we're going to be much better off for it, right? So I love that element of putting guardrails into giving yourself that mindset to say, let's just separate away, put it into the parameters to separate away, which I know you're going to go into, but it's okay to separate, and I'm not going to lose anything for that separation.
No. And in the article, I specifically say it's not going to damage your career. It's not going to damage your relationship. It's not going to damage your social life. And really, I mean, God, if I were to sit here and list them out, there's dozens of reasons. But the main two that come to mind is number one, sometimes that brief pause is actually going to work out way better in your favor, because you're less likely to have a knee jerk reaction, depending on what it is. So if I think about a work email that is a little tense, not in the sense that what was being communicated is tense, but the scenario, there are stakes around the scenario, or it's
Yeah, yeah.
the person sending it has their head on fire because it's a cool idea, or there's an opportunity, and they want to
Right.
create that momentum. You know, I've found that giving myself like an hour, or just saying, you know what, I'll reply to this after I eat dinner tonight, or what have you, that actually lets me structure my reply so that it's the most bang for your buck. And our buddy Jeremy Boone talks all the time about not just communicating but connecting, and like that is one of the most concrete strategies, in my opinion, at least. Just give yourself that brief reprieve, that little bit of
Mm-hmm.
pause, that little bit of space. Get your thoughts in order, put them out so that they're impactful. That's how that's one way, in at least in my world, that you connect when you send a message versus just communicating something back, you know?
I love that. So I love that using a pause is a weapon for your intention or for your work. I love that. So what else can we do, man? What's the next step?
Yeah, so I mean, think about it like this. If we're constantly consuming this information, it doesn't automatically go away. I mean, no, we don't remember all of it, but we retain more than I think we're conscious of at times. So what do you do with that? And everything that you hear, everything that you take in, typically will spurn, if you're a psychopath like me at least, everything that you hear and take in will spurn at least three or four different thoughts on top of that. Well, what are you doing with those? Are they just bouncing around in your head, exhausting you? Or are you going to give yourself the time to work through them, or et cetera? So that's really how this becomes something that you can leverage, is just giving yourself the ability to sort through it, let those thoughts kind of run their course, and bring clarity back to the forefront.
Mm,
It's probably my
mm,
favorite word right now: clarity.
mm.
Clarity, clarity, clarity. But the first one would really be, I think the first strategy I go into the article is using do not disturb mode on your
Yeah,
phone
love
or
that.
your laptop. I know Apple has it. I assume Android phones have it. I wouldn't know, but um, it's I mean, it's massive. If I'm ever trying to do any kind of work that requires me to not be interrupted, or not even work, any kind of interaction. So I first found out about it because back when I was in college, I remember being a freshman and I had recently joined a fraternity. I had all these new friends from classes because everybody, their first, 3 to 4 months on a college campus, is so eager to build a community around them, which is
Right.
like, I mean,
Right.
it's amazing, but it can also be overwhelming. I remember trying to study and I literally could not get through the first paragraph of this chapter of a chemistry book I had to, because my phone was dinging and blowing me up so bad. And I got visibly frustrated. And my roommate at the time, who was across the table in the library from me, goes, "Dude," and he swiped up, he hit the little crescent moon, and he goes, "Do this, set your phone back down. It'll stop dinging, it'll stop lighting up. You'll only know you have a notification when you pick it up."
Love that. One of my favorite things about the article is that you give real application. You give the tools that are going to get you to the ideas and the thesis that you're really working on through this piece, which we all know is important. So that definitive application, that really step by step approach that you're saying, use do not disturb, use these technological advances and software pieces or apps that people have already designed specifically for this reason. Use them to your advantage. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to mention, I mean, what that does, more importantly, is it just brings you into the moment, right? So if I'm an artist and I'm trying to paint and I need my devices, I need my technology to not interrupt me, then I'm going to set it up so that it doesn't. And if it's not tapping you, if it's not constantly dinging you, hitting you, etc., you're less likely to be sucked into it. Period.
It's
And
about
I
creating
use
that
look, man,
environment, right? Like you talk
totally,
about setting yourself up for success.
absolutely. And it just allows you to kind of be in the moment a little bit more. And it is such a low hanging fruit. Literally, uh, literally two motions of the hand, and you're set up, and you can set it down and proceed with things that probably need to take priority in that moment. So that would be number one. The second piece, or another strategy that I talk about, and this is one of my personal favorites, and it's one I've had to use in the past, is actually having some accountability be put on me. Like I put it on myself, but I use somebody else to help me do that. So whether that means, and again, like I'll use an example. I'll use an example here recently. Yeah, I had to get something done. It was pretty important. I was putting a workshop together for a conference that actually ended up getting postponed. But I had to get an abstract written out. I had to get a full hour-long workshop put together, had to get it structured, and had to get a proposal submitted. Um, and I had like 3 days to get this done. And night number 1, struggled with productivity, got a little bit done. Night number 2 was a little bit better, but I still was far away from where I needed to be. Night number 3, the application's due the next day. All bets are off at this point. And so I kind of pulled out, like I would consider this like the big guns, because it is a guaranteed way. I literally gave my phone to my roommate, and I took my laptop, I disconnected it from my phone, because a MacBook and an iPhone will talk to each other. I disconnected it from my phone so that I couldn't get notifications. They weren't synced. And I was like, basically, I need you to hold on to my phone until 10 p.m. because I have to get this done. And I cannot, for lack of a better term, I cannot be bothered with emails, texts, calls, group me notifications, um, you know, DMs in Twitter and Instagram, etc.
Smart.
And yeah, and s- there's a couple of caveats in that are really important. I kind of touch on them in the article, but basically, I would say only do that if you're not the kind of person who's going to resent that person for doing what you asked them to do.
Doesn't become a personal vendetta in that situation.
Yeah, and we've all seen this scenario in sitcoms and TV shows of people saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you this, and no matter what I say to you, don't give it back." And then they immediately start, crying for whatever they asked them to just not do. But it's just leveraging the people around you and kind of pulling them into something that you're trying to do. Why would you not? Why would you not use that? If you have the ability.
Leverage
Um,
it. When I read that, in the article, I immediately thought of something I saw a few years ago. I think it's pretty widespread and known these days, when a group of friends or a family get together for dinner at the house or a dinner in a restaurant, and they make and force everybody to put the phones in a basket. Right, that
mhm.
accountability piece with each other to not have that distraction, that disturbance from engaging in the moment and creating the memory. I love that piece, and like you said, well, first and foremost, you got to have the right accountability, and the accountability that's going to make sure that it's in your best interest, that it's not going to give up when you do beg for it back, that it's really a guardrail that works for you and doesn't work against you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very simple, and you kind of just have to have the maturity on your end to not resent the person for doing what you asked them to do. And
Love it.
that's yeah.
Love it.
So and it works. It flat out it works, 1,000%.
So
That is a surefire way.
as we're building these tricks, I think that they're listed out, and some great examples are in the blog post. What else can we do to really make sure that we're not just disconnected in order to get what we want to get done, but we're doing it in a manner that is, again, beneficial, is in the manner that we're really looking to actually achieve. Give us kind of the third piece as you've gone through the first couple there.
Well, you talk about one that has benefits in other ways. Get active. There has been a marriage, and I think it's a good marriage, a marriage of technology and fitness. However, just because just because your phone or whatever isn't going to give you a little bit of a reward for a workout doesn't mean the benefit's not there.
Mm.
I think that's an important acknowledgement. You hear these people that are like, "Oh man, forgot my Apple Watch, so this workout isn't going to count." And and listen, I understand human beings biologically are geared for reward systems.
Right, right.
I mean, uh, I mean, that makes total sense. However, there's nothing wrong as long as you have the means and you're safe. Um, Go for a walk, go for a run, leave your phone on the kitchen counter.
Hmm.
Like, separate yourself from it. Socially distance yourself from your phone.
I love it.
Um, so that's one surefire way. And not to mention, I mean, we've struggled with it even with some of our clients in the past, of people that are texting while trying to receive your coaching, and like, just for whatever reason can't seem to get away from the phone in their workout, and the workout suffers, right? Usually what they're having to respond to, because what they're saying in that moment is that takes priority over what I drove here and paid for. So whatever they're interfacing with in that moment probably isn't the most positive, or at least
Yeah.
in the way they perceive it in that moment. So it's really it's a lose lose. It's a race to the bottom. It's a
Right.
zero sum game. It doesn't have to be. So if you just, again, right, the power of the pause. I'm going to take 30 minutes and work out. And unless something is on fire, or my credit cards have been stolen, or my loved ones are unsafe, I'm not looking at the damn phone.
Yeah. In so many efforts, and Billy, I'd love for you to chime in on this. In so many efforts, we try to get our clients utilizing technology to keep accountability and to really work towards progress, and showing that progress through objective measurements and everything. But we've heard of the Strava effect in the endurance community, where they're training for that comparison, or they're training for that trophy that you get by showing off how far you've run, your pace, your distance, whatever the case may be. And it becomes a detriment, right? Billy, where have you seen this with some clients in the past that you've worked with, where the technology itself goes from maybe even potentially beginning to be a positive, yet it's taken this turn to becoming a real negative?
Two ways I think I've seen it. I think the first is people lose sight of actually observing how they personally feel and rely on the technology to tell them how they feel. So let's use heart rate variability, for instance, or something else. Well, everything's low today. I got to take a day off. Well, okay, there's a merit to something
Yes.
like that, but I also think there's merit to, like, how do you personally feel? Oh,
Yes.
I feel really good today. Like, let's listen to that and let's actually pay attention to that and go forward. And then I think the second piece is, on the opposite side, technology tells me I should do X today. It tells me I need this many miles. It tells me I need to work at this speed. It tells me I need to burn this many calories. It tells me all these things I need to do today. But I feel like crap. I'm super stressed out. I've had a tough day at work. That's probably not the best thing for me. And so I think the biggest hurdle I've seen is when people become directed solely on technology and
Mm-hmm.
lose sight of the biggest strength of all of us. And that's just having an internal awareness around, how do I actually feel today? And what do I think I need? Uh, Again, I think
The
we're
skill
moving.
is the knowledge that we're gaining from the guidance that technology gives us. So I love that, how we can be empowered initially, but we can be hindered, through a long term if we're not careful.
It's a data point, right? It's a triangulation. It's, here's how I feel, here's what it objectively tells me, and here's what I got to do today. Is there a middle ground to that? And I think trends are something to pay attention to, but I think it's easy to get caught up in objectively what the technology is saying you need to do, and thinking you have to do that.
And I know we've gotten into a little bit of a rabbit hole here from the original point that you made, which is the separation comes from being active. But the point still stands that in order to be active and get disconnected, you literally got to disconnect yourself, right, Dylan? As far as being able to be active without that distraction. So moving on, man, what's the next piece you got for us outside of being active?
Yeah. Well, before I jump into that, I could sum that up with this very simple, like one little one liner here. You don't accidentally disconnect. It's very rare. It's very rare that something actually takes your attention or your focus away from these pieces of technology that are so ingratiated into our lives. But the last two that I cover are meditation, and I know that's a sticky word, so I want to make sure we chat about that one. And then the one I want to get into here now, which is to begin and end your day without technology. So, and this is, I'll
Why
be
why are
completely,
those why are those so important? I mean, that's a pretty specific tactic there, to book in those things. Talk to me about why that's important.
well, I mean, again, let's ask the question of what should we do? What's best for however many thousands or millions of years, humans didn't wake up in the morning and immediately start consuming information. So are we meant to? So nobody's got a concrete answer for that, but I would argue that there are there are more positives than negatives to not immediately grabbing your phone the second that you wake up and scrolling through everything that you missed when you were asleep. Um, I, I I think there's an addiction. I think there's an addictive quality to that. It is the very first thing we do when we wake up is we immediately grab that phone. And I don't think it's necessarily that we're addicted to the phone. We're addicted to the world within the phone. We're addicted to
The
the things
fear
that
of
we may have
missing out.
missed. I think that's a huge piece. And it's also, I understand the more practical applications of like if your phone is your alarm clock, like me, that's why I
Mhm,
say I
mhm.
fail at this one. If your phone is your alarm clock, well, you quite literally can't start your day without grabbing your phone first thing. So, I mean, a simple workaround there is to go get yourself an alarm clock. They make all kinds of awesome ones these days.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Well, let me
be-
touch on that a little bit with Billy. You talk a lot, Billy, about morning routines and how powerful those could be. Is that something that you recommend a lot to include in the routine to separate yourself or not include specific things?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with Dylan. I think you know, it's funny. I was talking to Jeremy last night, and Jeremy used the phrase I thought summed it up well. Don't start your day in someone else's story, right? So if you show up and you instantly go to social media, or you instantly go to email, or you instantly go to text message, you are instantly inserting yourself in someone else's story, right? Whether that was meant to be good or bad. Um, Start with your own story. How can you set yourself up for success? And I think we have a or some people have a strong uh, bias towards, well, oh, okay, a morning routine has to be this elaborate thing that I have to do. I mean, morning routine can simply be making coffee in the morning, but
Sure.
it's just being mindful of that time and focusing on that very present thing that you're doing. And that might just be getting your cup of coffee. It could be as elaborate as doing some sort of mindfulness, some sort of movement, some sort of daily reflection. It could be that long and elaborate, but it doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
So I think when we hear morning routine, I think we gotta shift focus from, oh, it has to be this massive thing. It can be super small. But I also think start in a way that sets you up for success. And again, even if that's 5 minutes of just a quick run through of your own calendar and what you need to do to be successful that day. I think it's that simple. But I think we have
Nice.
to start with our own story in mind.
I love
yeah,
that. Don't start your day in someone else's story. We talk a lot, and you hear a lot about morning routines. Dylan, go on the other end of it. Why is it important, and is it as effective, as important to be able to have that evening routine, that end of the day routine, when you talk about beginning and ending with disconnecting?
yeah. I mean, it certainly is. And the big elephant in the room with a nighttime routine is sleep. I mean, and that's an entirely different rabbit hole that we can go down. But I think we all generally agree that you need to set yourself up to have good sleep, and that good sleep is important. I don't think anybody's arguing those two things. Um, I don't think there's any contention. But I mean, I love Billy's point about morning routine being simple, and that's actually exactly what I say in the article I wrote. Is that for some people, there's a very realistic chance that that 15 to 20 minutes right as soon as they wake up is going to be the only piece that they have all day. I'm not someone who has kids, but I would imagine the moment that they're up, like you can't really live out your story, to the full degree from that point on, especially if they're young and they require you and they're depending on you. So yeah, I love that. At night, we all know that blue light from screens, and you can turn that off, but any kind of artificial light or just light in general can be really disruptive. Because our bodies are going to process that a lot differently. I mean, again, biologically or evolutionarily, we were meant to rise and fall with the sun and
Mhm.
with changes in ambient light. So taking that hour, or I call it, it's like setting a bedtime for your technology before your actual bedtime, that's going to be huge because it allows you to do, I mean, it allows you to do a handful of things. Number one, your body will kind of start to naturally get out of that away from the inclination that it should be awake. So your circadian rhythm isn't affected, which is huge. Number two, again, you're scheduling in time to be present and just to be. So you power down the laptop, cut the TV off, set the phone aside, put it on the charger. If you're struggling with that, your charger's in a different room. All these different little micro strategies, but essentially it just allows you that time. And it doesn't have to be, I talk about an hour in the article. It doesn't have to be an hour. You should try to aim to stop interacting with technology about an hour before you lay down, generally. But one thing that I do, because I've been very intentional about this, especially with bedtimes changing in this new way of life, is I get away from the technology and I spend that last little bit of time before I lay down in bed setting up for my next day. So I go ahead and this is the uh, organization freak in me coming out, but I go ahead and like coffee set to auto brew, 30 minutes before anybody in the house wakes up. My clothes are laid out for the next day, so I can just go ahead and shower, walk into my room, put everything on. It takes me less than a minute. And I can go ahead and start my day with a cup of coffee and a little bit of peace, and I'm accomplishing a handful of things right off the bat. So that kind of helps me set up. That also is like the perfect amount of time doing those necessary things to set myself up for success the next day. That also usually shakes out to be the perfect amount of time for me to have separated and kind of forget whatever I was, really into, whether that's like a conversation that had me wrapped up, a project I'm working on, or a news article or something. It kind of gives me that couple of degrees of separation to clear my head and let those thoughts run their course. So that mine's not racing when you lay down. Nothing's worse than when you lay down in bed at night and you can't stop fixating on a handful of things that are going on. So it's really, you could argue it's a form of meditation, but it's essentially just, again, giving yourself that necessary little bit of space to be able to ramp down from the demands of your day.
I like it. Automate, simplify, great pieces of technique. So as we're wrapping up here, man, the article is fantastic. It's called 5 Ways to Disconnect from Technology During the Coronavirus Quarantine. Dylan, where can people find the article?
We're going to be pushing it out. It's going up on Medium, which is, if you haven't heard about that social media platform, you should check it out. I think you get 3 free stories a month. So, and we're working hard to be able to post that many. So we actually got you covered from your allotment standpoint. We'll put it up on Facebook, Instagram as well. And if you're subscribed to our email newsletter, which you should be, if you're not, you're missing out, then you'll be getting that sent straight to your inbox.
Love it. Anything to wrap us up, Billy?
Disconnect.
I like it. We will be disconnecting with you guys right now as you guys are working to disconnect from technology. Until next time, later.